It was nearly midnight at the Lancaster Grand Hotel in central London. The marble floors gleamed under soft golden lights, and the sound of distant rain whispered against the tall glass windows. Emma Collins, a young single mother working double shifts as a housekeeper, was finishing her final rounds. Her body ached, her eyes heavy. She hadn't slept properly in days. Her daughter, Lily, had been sick again, and Emma had been juggling hospital visits, cleaning rooms, and crushing exhaustion. Inside the hotel's top suite, everything sparkled. Every corner was immaculate. The suite belonged to Richard Hale, the cold and feared billionaire CEO who had taken over the Lancaster Group 6 months ago. Rumors said he never smiled. Employees called him the man made of glass, beautiful, untouchable, and sharp enough to cut anyone who got too close. Emma had been warned to never be caught inside his suite without permission. But that night, fate had other plans. She was dusting the enormous window when her phone buzzed. It was a text from her babysitter. Lily had a fever again. Emma's heart sank into her stomach. She finished reading the message, whispered a prayer for her daughter, and sat down for what she swore would be just a single minute to catch her breath. But her exhaustion was a tide she couldn't fight. Within moments, she was asleep, curled up on the plush sofa, still holding her cleaning cloth. Minutes later, the private elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Richard Hale stepped out, his coat damp from the London rain, his face as unreadable as ever. He immediately noticed the lights were still on, which was unusual. When he walked into the main living area, his eyes caught something completely unexpected. A woman, fast asleep on a sofa. Her head was resting gently on the armrest, her uniform slightly wrinkled, and exhaustion was carved deeply into her features. He should have been furious. Any other employee would have been fired on the spot, no questions asked, but for some reason, he didn't move. Instead, something inside him shifted, like a key turning in a long-locked door. A memory surfaced, faint but sharp, of his own mother working late nights, coming home long after he'd fallen asleep, her face etched with the same weariness. He placed his briefcase down quietly, slipped off his coat, and simply watched her for a moment. The sleeping woman stirred slightly, murmuring her daughter's name, Lily, in her sleep. That was the moment. That was when the ice that had encased his heart for years began to melt. Instead of waking her and unleashing his anger, Richard did something he hadn't done in a very long time. He acted with simple kindness. He gently pulled a cashmere blanket from a nearby chair and carefully placed it over her shoulders. Then, he left the room without saying a word, leaving her to her much-needed rest. The next morning, Emma woke up in a wave of sheer panic. Sunlight streamed through the window, and she was still in the CEO's suite. She saw the blanket, neatly draped over her, and then a note on the table beside her. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It read, "Come to my office at 9 a.m. Her heart dropped. This was it. She was definitely fired. The kindness with the blanket must have been a trick. At precisely 9 o'clock, she stood before his glass-walled office, her body trembling. Richard looked up from his desk, his expression just as unreadable as it had been the night before. "I should fire you," he said calmly. His voice, even Emma's eyes, widened in shock, bracing for the inevitable. "But I won't." She stared at him, unable to process his words. "You fell asleep because you're exhausted," he continued, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "You're exhausted because you're doing everything alone. That's not carelessness, that's survival." He slid an envelope across the desk toward her. Her mind raced. Was it a severance package? A warning? She slowly opened it. Inside was not a termination notice, but a check. It was for an amount that made her gasp. It was enough to cover all of Lily's medical bills and give them months of stability. Tears welled in her eyes, but her pride was strong. "I don't take charity," she said, her voice breaking but firm. "It's not charity," he replied quietly, his voice lower now. "It's a reminder that no one succeeds alone. I had forgotten that. You reminded me." From that day forward, everything changed. Emma kept working at the hotel, but the crushing weight on her shoulders was gone. Her life began to rebuild, piece by piece. She could afford proper care for Lily, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. Richard, meanwhile, started visiting the hotel more often. He was no longer just the cold CEO barking orders. He was a man rediscovering his own humanity. People in the hotel whispered that he smiled more now, that he spoke softer, that he asked about their families. Some said the quiet housekeeper had changed him. Others believed she simply reminded him of something he'd long forgotten, The Power of Kindness. Months later, the Lancaster Grand Hotel won a prestigious award for excellence in hospitality. During the grand ceremony, Richard stood on stage, surrounded by thunderous applause and flashing cameras, but his eyes weren't on the crowd or the award. They searched the room until they found Emma, standing quietly at the back in her uniform, her little girl, now healthy and bright-eyed, holding her hand. He raised his glass slightly in her direction, a silent, private thank you that only the two of them understood. She smiled back, a single tear of gratitude glistening on her cheek. The world saw a powerful CEO celebrating another corporate success, but only he knew the real truth that a tired housekeeper, who had fallen asleep on a sofa one rainy night, had taught him the one thing his billions could never buy: compassion. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that reminds us of the good in the world. See you next time.